Welcome into the Husker247 Podcast. I am Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson. That is right. We are video recording our podcast. You can see our faces. If you wanted to watch it, you have that opportunity now. This is what we look like when we talk to each other. This is what people have clamored for. God only knows why, but this is what they're going to get. Brunch, you're shaking your head.
This is what we look like. Hope you're happy.
I see Schaefer wore his best hat for this one, too. That's good.
It's a Super Bowl week. You got to be rocking this hat. If you're not going to wear it now, then when are you ever going to wear it?
Company guy. Look at company guy here.
Which Super Bowl was that? I can't get my Roman numerals right.
Pretty sure it was last year's Super Bowl. It was Bucks versus Chiefs.
Good one.
That's
yeah. I mean, it was televised by CBS, America's most watched network. Brian, clearly you weren't watching.
I am a company guy as well, but I will acknowledge that hopefully this doesn't get me canned. I gave that hat away. It was a little too stiff for me. That's all.
Is that a cathedral hat? That thing, it's like the Sistine Chapel on the point of the top of that thing.
Yeah, it's very comfortable, very stylish hat. It's gotten a lot of respect down here in South Lincoln. As Slider and I have gone on walks, people have honked, they've waved. I assume it's about the hat. I don't know what else they would be honking or waving at, but maybe that's just how people are down here. Extra friendly.
They like a good CBS hat in South Lincoln.
Well, I mean, again, who could blame them? So we'll dive into the Super Bowl a little bit later in today's show, but let's just go ahead and dive into a topic that we get into every spring. I feel like it's one of those things that it starts happening earlier and earlier in a player's career, where you kind of have these conversations where, you know, a guy could be a redshirt sophomore or a redshirt freshman, and it's kind of like, oh man, or they got to start showing us something because there's going to be players coming past them. And so I know we sort of refer to them as now or never players, and I mean, I think this is kind of a good time to dive into that as we're a few weeks yet out from the spring. But Nebraska has several of these guys on the roster. I asked each of you to come up with a name, and we'll sit here and we'll kind of run through those, and we'll come up with some other ones as well. But as I think about this, one of the first people that comes to mind for me is a guy in the 2019 class that I know Nebraska was excited to get the commitment when they did. He was a player that had played in a 3-4 system, was comfortable in a 3-4 system. There was some conversation early in his career that he was having some good practices and starting to kind of push the issue a little bit. And then these last 2 years where you've had a senior-laden defensive line, but you've also had guys like Ty Robinson and Casey Rogers break through, we've kind of wondered, where is Mosai Newsome? So with no Ben Stilley and no DeAndre Thomas, and a potential for Nebraska to be in a four-man look for times, I'm wondering if now isn't when we hear more about Mosai Newsome, a guy, again, in the 2019 class that Eric Shenander went out and brought over from Iowa, someone that, again, they were fairly excited about. But he's now, this would be his 4th season in the program, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. And there's playing time opportunity out there for defensive linemen. So I think this is a big spring for a Mosai Newsome. What do you guys recall hearing about him over the last couple years?
There was legitimate buzz from inside the program about him prior to 2020, that season. And so this isn't just a case of it's everybody on the outside talking up a guy without knowing anything, and maybe he's going to be on the radar. There was some coaches and people behind the scenes who thought, even 2 years ago, that he might be able to give them some reps and help out there. So, that part is interesting. You kind of laid it out well. I mean, there's just been a lot of sort of a logjam maybe in front of him, and maybe that's been part of it. I guess if you're the optimistic type, the thing you like about his situation is as a fourth-year guy in the program, he should be up to date as far as physicality and sort of like having gotten there in the weight room and with conditioning and all that stuff, which sometimes holds guys in the trenches back. But that shouldn't be the case with him at this point. So even though we haven't seen him, you hope that it just all sort of comes together and then it combines with what you would think at this point is a body that's sort of been built up behind the scenes to play in the Big Ten, but we'll see.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, Nebraska was able to win this commitment over Michigan State. I think Wisconsin was involved to a degree. I don't know how much Iowa was really after Mosai Newsome at the end there in the summer of 2018 when he committed. But this is a guy that, again, they kind of had some pretty big aspirations for. And so the interesting thing is because of the COVID season, we say he's in his fourth year in the program. He's technically only going to be a sophomore redshirt. So he could have 3 years to be able to play out in front of Nebraska and or to play out here at Nebraska. And so I'm really curious what kind of comes of Mosai Newsome here this spring, but that's definitely someone I want to hear more about from Mike Dawson, who will once again have eyes back on a guy that initially he was involved a little bit in the recruitment. It was mostly Eric Shenander. But then, Mike Dawson also was expected to be the defensive line coach in 2018. So it's kind of a circular way to get back there. Bruntz, you got anything you want to throw in on Mosai Newsome?
Yeah, I think he's a pretty classic, now or never guy. I mean, as much as we heard a little bit about him before the 2020 season, I mean, he was really never – a name that factored all that much last season. I mean, you go back to, what did it say? Tony Tuioti said that, there was always a kind of a number of guys that he trusted to go in and play. And I don't know that Mosai Newsome was ever really in that group. And then you kind of had like the constriction of that group too, once you got to the season where you had a lot, a small number of guys playing a lot of snaps. So, you completely flip that this year where you don't have much returning depth, and maybe he can give you something. New set of eyes, and certainly open jobs. So we'll see if he can kind of emerge. But I would put him in that group of Jalen Weaver, Ruquan Buckley. Those kinds of guys that, you kind of only hear about them if you ask about them, I guess. And that's kind of where Nebraska needs somebody to emerge from that group of guys.
All right. Who's got another name for us here?
You ready, Bruntz?
Alante Brown. Brown.
What would you like to add to that name?
That's the name. No, so obviously wide receivers, huge point of discussion in the offseason with what they've brought in. Mickey Joseph kind of energizing that room as well. And it's kind of time for Alante Brown to show that he's worthy of being in that rotation with all these new guys. He's a guy that since he's been on campus has had a heck of a time staying healthy, just bad luck with injuries. I know he's had shoulder problems. But you go back and you watch some games at the end of last season, and he was out there in crunch time and late in games. And, a guy that was a big recruiting win for Nebraska out of Chicago, and just for whatever reason hasn't factored in that rotation yet for Nebraska. So I think it's his time. He's a veteran. The thing I wonder with him, he's a guy that seems to have the speed that can stretch the field. So maybe there's a role for him in this new Mark Whipple offense of getting a little bit vertical than what Nebraska's done before. But I think he's also a guy too that frankly could benefit from somebody else handling wide receiver rotations. The divvying up of snaps on that in that group has been a head scratcher for a few years now. And maybe, with Mickey there and kind of taking a hard look at everybody, maybe he benefits from that. But it's going to be a crowded room, and now is the time for him to step up.
Yeah, I mean, wide receiver to me feels like a spot where they've done a nice job stacking it up pre-spring as far as numbers to like, okay, let's let this competition roll now. But I do have the feeling, and I'm not connecting this to Alante Brown, but with some people in the program, it feels like that's a spot where if you're to take a guess at like where could you lose a couple guys to the portal, after spring, wide receiver is one of them. I just think the numbers are pretty high there. So it fits exactly into this category for guys like Alante and other players who haven't had it happen yet, that it's that point where, if Camonte Grimes, Latrell Neville, Sean Hardy, if a few of those guys get in front of a guy who was recruited a year or two before him, that's the old part where a guy looks at it and says, okay, this is going to be really tough to climb out of this and work myself onto the field. So that's the case with most of these guys we're talking about. It's where the guys a class ahead of you are suddenly like in the conversation even with you, or they've passed you on the highway, and then it's hard to come back from that.
Yeah, do we think that it helps Alante Brown that Mickey Joseph is now his position coach? I mean, I hadn't heard anything with Matt Lubick and Alante Brown or anything like that, but it's just maybe just a completely fresh start, starting over, an opportunity to impress a new set of eyes, a new coach involved in that, and even maybe a slightly different offensive approach. All of this seems like it could help Alante Brown sort of emerge and reinvigorate some excitement with his name at that position. And of course, at the same time, everybody there is largely new. There's not a whole lot of guys in front of them that just have this institutional knowledge or have this understanding of what it is and how things have to be done. So it does feel like he's in a little bit of a situation where he can maybe take advantage of the changeover of a coach and really kind of put his best foot forward with Mickey Joseph and try to win him over and try to fit well with this offense. I don't think it's a question of talent. I'm not really sure what it's been a question of. I mean, it felt like they sort of went out of their way not to put him on the field at times. Part of it, I wonder if it's because he's a little small. I think Nebraska has to stop bringing in these receivers and then putting them on the edge and then getting upset when they don't block as well as their 6'3", 200-pound wide receivers. Like you can't have it both ways sometimes. So I do wonder, if that wasn't somewhat of the issue, but the talent is definitely there. And this is a guy that's been a good ambassador for the program too. I think he wants to be successful at Nebraska. He wants to be involved in things here. And I don't think attitude has really ever been an issue with Alante Brown.
He talked one time late in the season on a Monday, and I remember he was just kind of like running through the list of injuries that he had dealt with, and they were primarily shoulder injuries, which as a wide receiver, it's a tough injury to kind of deal with. And for him too, I mean, I think was still relatively new to the wide receiver position as well. So that was kind of another factor, I think, of what maybe put him behind a little bit. So I think he is a guy that's a case of probably benefiting from a new set of eyes, like you said, and I think he's probably not alone in that wide receiver room either, of guys that they were thrown in at odd times in odd situations and just never really seemed like they were completely part of the plan. I mean, you could even say that heck about like Xavier Betts too, with the way some of last year went.
My turn. Do we want to move on to who BC is bringing to the table here? Who's your now or never?
All right, I'll say Noah Pola-Gates, safety Noah Pola-Gates, who was a 4-star recruit, 4th year in the program now. He's been very active on special teams. He played in all the games last year, so I don't like to diminish that part. I mean, there is some guys who come in and just because you aren't necessarily a starter, if you're helping in that phase of the game, that matters. And he's taken a lot of pride in that part. he's another case, sort of like where we were talking with Mosai Newsome, where you have a bunch of veterans in front of him the last 2 years. And maybe that it's as simple as that. I mean, maybe now is his turn, now that Markel Dismuke and Deontay Williams have moved on, and he goes out and shows it's his job to win. We've seen stories like this before where it can happen. And Luke Gifford is an example of that. As we talk about all these guys, Luke Gifford had injuries and could not get going during the first part of his Husker career. And I remember he came out one day and told the media, he basically said himself, it's now or never. It's got to happen now. I'm putting this pressure on me. And I think the guys who actually take that sort of challenge and just accept that's the way it is, if I don't do it now, Deshaun Singleton or one of these other guys gets in front of me, it is tough, as I said earlier, to climb out of that. So that's sort of got to be Pulla Gates' mindset, is that obviously Travis Fisher has stacked up some new guys to make both Noah and Miles Farmer, honestly, win spots. Deshaun Singleton's a JUCO guy who they don't bring in a guy like that unless they think he could, possibly play right away. I think there's guys that we sometimes list as corners that Travis Fisher might think of still as safeties. A Marquise Buford or somebody like that could enter into that conversation. So I think there's like 5 or 6 guys. Isaac Gifford could be a safety still. I know he's the JoJo Jr. kind of guy, but he's listed as a safety. So there's a lot of competition, but Noah Pulla Gates has as much a shot at it as anybody. It's just I think sometimes there's been a question, is he big enough? Has his size held him back? I don't know if that's the case. I think he's a hard hitter, but he needs to have good health and have a very good spring.
Bruntz, what have you heard on Noah Pulla Gates?
Yeah, I think Brian laid it out pretty well. I mean, he is kind of one of the guys that was hurt the most by Deontay Williams and Markel Dismuke deciding to come back and play a 6th season. I mean, if they hadn't done that, I think he's right there for more playing time in the defensive backfield. It's going to be an interesting battle back there, because I'm kind of like Brian, where I think that, I don't know that Miles Farmer had the best end of last season. I think he's definitely going to have to win that job. I kind of wonder if one of those corners, is going to come out of nowhere and surprise some people at that safety spot, just because of the way Nebraska recruits defensive backs. They want guys that can play both. And, Marquise Buford was listed as a safety at times last year on the depth chart. I think he's a guy that, that everybody in the program is really high on. So as far as Noah Pulla Gates is concerned, I mean, I think he's shown that he has potential. It's just a matter of being able to get in there and have an opportunity. So, I think whenever you kind of had that category of we're going to talk about now or nevers, that was where my head kind of went first. Was this is a guy that's been around a long time, finally has an opportunity and has to run with it. I mean, I was trying to think, even just to digress quickly, who we would have said last year was probably the poster boy for that. And I Ramir Johnson, is that fair?
Yeah, he would have been on the list.
Yep. Caleb Tanner is definitely someone that, this whole conversation or topic really is sort of built around. Like, okay, we want to see something, can you provide it here? Matt Sichterman, certainly taking full advantage of the opening at right guard, winning that job. At one point in time, and Austin Allen might have been a guy like this. So I do think that there are guys that have success when they fall into this kind of category and into this kind of role. With Noah Pulla Gates specifically, I always wonder if he's not just a little small to be playing safety. I mean, he's a little bit undersized relative to, especially when you put him back there with Farmer. But so that's kind of where my head goes initially. But this was a guy that was a very highly talented high school recruit, sought after by a lot of people. Nebraska had to wait out Alabama, where he had been silently committed, and then they sort of took his offer away late, and then they kind of had to survive Arizona State and USC. And so this was a big recruiting win at one point in time. So I definitely think there's a little bit of pressure from the coaching side of things. We want this kid to work out. I mean, you put in that much effort, that much time, and you get those wins over those other programs. You want that to be reflected, but you don't want to just hand it to them. And so I am a little, maybe of the three names, for me, probably the most skeptical of Noah Pola Gates of this group. But that's just kind of where I come in at. And I am convinced that they really like Deshaun Singleton because they didn't pursue a whole lot of safety options after him. And so I really think that he's going to have a great shot at taking one of those jobs, but we'll see what Noah Pola Gates is able to do. Is there any other names that you guys were able to come up with? I've got one. It's hard because I think he's in that spot where maybe with a look at four down linemen, or maybe you try to bring him in a little bit pass rushing specialist. We've heard his name pop up several times. I'd like to see it go from intriguing to doing more with it. Jamari Butler is someone that I feel like we've heard about. I feel like there's some discussion that he has some pass rushing ability. And it feels like this spring is a good opportunity for him to get some more reps and for Nebraska to maybe figure out how they can take advantage of that. In addition to a loaded room that also has Garrett Nelson, Caleb Tanner, Blaise Gunnerson. And you know, if you're moving out of the 3-4 look at times, then what happens with some of those linebackers? So Jamari Butler is someone else that came to mind for me. Anybody for you guys? Anyone else you can think of?
Butler was one that I thought of. Gunnerson was another too. It seems like there's quite a few guys in that outside linebacker group that perhaps fit into that. I also think people generally are more quick to write off pass rusher types. Like if they can't get to the pass rusher right from the get-go, then it's not going to happen. But those were a couple that came to mind. Chris Hickman, I mean, is kind of the ultimate now or never guy. I don't know that he kind of rises to the level of the other guys that we've already talked about, though.
Do we kind of know what Chris Hickman is at this point?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking. It was like, it's kind of been written a little bit. I don't know. I was trying to think if there was somebody in that running back room that would also fit that category, but who?
Step.
Yeah. I mean, I also am not too quick to write off anybody in that group. There's like 8 guys.
I wasn't sure if you were just not ever going to give him the now. You're just going to say never with Step.
I hope it works for him. He's fun at interviews. He's always got a couple of gems.
I think on the offensive line, you could probably talk yourself into a few guys on this list just because of sort of with the new coach part, you know, like if Donovan Raiola analyzes this situation and you're like 9th or 10th on his list after this is all said and done, you know, you got a lot of work to do. And I think Ethan Piper's a guy I've kind of stood up for, and I will, that, and just saying that he's still young in the sense of a lineman to me. Like I think he's a 3rd-year guy. And he kind of got thrown into the fire early in his career. And so sometimes we say, well, that guy was really inconsistent. We remember every false start penalty. He can't get it done at this level. And I'm not ready to say that about him, but I do think it's a critical juncture in his career because of the fact that where's he going to be? Could he be a center in that conversation with the other guys we're talking about? Is he a guard? And, you know, he was a starter last year at this time. And now I don't think we think of him that way. So he sort of got a real stop sign put up in front of his progress. And now he's got to show a response to that. And he's an interesting player to me. I always think those guys who are like 3rd-year linemen are really interesting on either side of the ball. It's just like, you know, people kind of have started to form opinions, and there's a lot of cases where it doesn't happen for a guy till his 4th or 5th year in the trenches. And so you do have to remind yourself of that. Sichterman is a case study of that. You know, he was a guy who you didn't hear at all about for like 4 years in his career, and he was starting at right guard last season. So those stories definitely happen.
Yeah. Ethan Piper is actually going to be a fourth-year player for Nebraska.
4th year. So, I mean, that adds to it, though. I mean, yeah, I was thinking 3rd year, but he's to that point where it's like if you are beat out by a 2nd-year guy, it gets pretty tricky. So, yeah.
It's interesting. A lot of these names, Chris Hickman, Ethan Piper, Mosai Newsome, they're all the 2019 class. You've kind of got like this group of guys like Garrett Nelson and Luke Reimer and Nick Henrich and Ty Robinson that sort of, you know, even Bryce Benhart fits into this to a degree, that have sort of just have kind of their roles. Now, Benhart, we'll see what it looks like for him. And then you've got a bunch of those guys in 2019 where they're still trying to figure out, okay, what is this player? Who is this guy? And so that group, that 2019 class, if Scott Frost is here for 2023, they need some of those guys to really step up from that 2019 class. Like it's their team really at this point. You don't have a lot of 2018 guys left. You got a ton of different players coming from the transfer portal, but that group of 2019, I mean, they're the ones that are going to be in the leadership role. They're the ones that are going to be in starting spots. It's pretty much their team now. And so that's going to be really interesting for me to watch, is to see who else kind of emerges from that. All right, let's take a quick time out here for a second. And when we return, we are going to discuss Dwight Bootle, who committed last week. We will talk about Fred Hoiberg and Nebraska basketball. And then we will see if anyone is going to pick Zac Taylor and the Bengals to pull off yet another upset on Sunday against the Rams in the Super Bowl. So real quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, I mentioned this. So 2023 defensive back Dwight Bootle commits to Nebraska. Would have been Monday of last week. We did not get a chance to discuss it when we were running down signing day last Wednesday during the show. So we'll have an opportunity here. BCU actually spoke with Dwight Bootle. First and foremost, is he as good of an interview as DiCaprio Bootle became to be over his 5-year career at Nebraska?
Yeah, he's got potential there. You can see the Bootle in him, which I always love talking to DiCaprio. Ever since DiCaprio was like a freshman at Nebraska, I love talking to him. He was always a guy he just had a lot of interesting thoughts, and was a favorite of Travis Fisher. And I think Dwight Bootle's kind of interesting because he hadn't got the offer publicly from Nebraska till basically right before he committed. And you kind of forgot about him. Like as far as around here, he was interested in some other Big Ten schools. He was even public and sort of saying like he was interested in Wisconsin. If they offered him, that would be something that would be hard to turn down. Michigan did offer him, I believe. So he definitely had people's attention. He really got Nebraska's attention at a camp I think it was last summer, that Florida International camp, and Travis Fisher was there. And that's where their connection started to take off beyond just being, oh, you're the brother to DiCaprio, like that's according to Dwight. So, and I think he also saw, frankly, this was maybe where NIL comes into play, an opportunity because his name is known already in Nebraska circles, that there could be opportunity with that by going to Lincoln, because his brother already kind of got that train moving. And so that might have helped Nebraska's cause here too.
Yeah, I thought the Big Ten component of it was really interesting. Andrew Ivins was telling me a couple days before the Bootle news went official that he was basically set on going to a Big Ten school. He views the Big Ten as the best conference to kind of get yourself prepared for the NFL. I don't know if that is I'm not sure exactly why that might be the case, but it is a large conference. I mean, you have bigger guys. You have guys that are more likely physical traits of what you're going to see on Sunday than if you're in the Big 12 or the Pac-12 or, potentially even the ACC. I mean, the SEC and the Big 10 produce the most NFL players, and they have probably the closest simulation in size. So I think that was part of it for Bootle. And Ivins was saying that he really likes, what he's watched. I mean, he's held his own under the lights down in one of the most talent-rich areas in the country. He's played on 7-on-7 teams and traveled around and played well. He can be very aggressive. We saw this with DiCaprio. This is a guy, and if he has that same kind of mindset, DiCaprio wasn't scared to come in and tackle. I mean, he was an undersized guy playing corner that they used at safety at times because he could provide that for him. I mean, he just was someone who was really tough and scrappy. And if Dwight has that same attitude, I think that he's going to flourish under Travis Fisher, and I think he'll do well in college. And so a nice addition for Nebraska. It's their third commit in the 2023 class. Do you guys have a guess at what month did Nebraska have their third commit in the 2022 class? We'll start with Bruntz, who looked up and to the left while searching for his answer.
Yeah, it's where I usually find it. I think it was like July.
Nope.
Had the season started?
They had 3 commits before
it felt like it took forever.
It did take a long time.
June or July, probably after that run of official visits in June, I'll say.
It was June. Now, can you name that person?
Number 3?
Yeah.
Is it Chase Androff?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. What do I win?
Yeah. All right. Sorry, BC, you didn't get to answer any of this.
That's all right.
Trivia. Well, we'll go to you next time.
I was going to guess Jaleel Martin. When did he commit?
He committed in November.
He waited.
The Ohio State game.
It was the camp where it all clicked for him, but he didn't. You're right. Okay.
I want you guys, and I want the listeners and the viewers, because we have viewers now, to take the 2022 class, not the people in it, not what Nebraska got out of it, but how it operated, how it went, the different milestones of it. Take all of that, crumple it into a ball, put the ball into a trash bin, take a match, throw the match into the trash bin and light it on fire, because they will not have another recruiting cycle like that. It was a disaster for a variety of reasons that were out of Nebraska's hands. And I think this is going to go much faster in terms of a recruiting cycle, hitting certain benchmarks. I think they're going to take more high school players. But last year's recruiting cycle was so bizarre, and I fully expect 2023 to be more to the norm. Now, those are always famous last words when you put expectations with Nebraska anything right now, but I feel pretty good about it. Dwight Bootle is commit number 3. I expect Nebraska to have 5 commits by the time, they're basically at the end of March. They're getting ready for that spring game. I mean, they're going to have people coming in the first weekend in March for a junior day. They're going to have people coming in for practices throughout March. I know they're already setting up to have official visits for the spring game in April. They are looking to move fast on this. I think in part because if they can get stuff locked down, you get into the transfer portal season of late November and December, you can put more of your focus there and you can work ahead to 2024. So we'll see how that plays out exactly for Nebraska, but I do not expect a repeat of the 2022 class, especially in terms of how slow everything went. Bruntz, do you have anything you want to say on Dwight Bootle before we move on?
No, I think you guys hit it. I was just writing down all these guarantees. It was you said a top 10 class.
Yeah. I did not say that.
Everybody in the boat by August, and
nope.
Something about
5-star. I heard.
Yeah, I heard 5-star too. That was
multiple 5 stars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well,
from Florida, no less.
I am more than happy to refund everything people paid for to listen to this podcast and watch it on YouTube. So that's what I can do if Nebraska doesn't hit those benchmarks. All right. We'll leave this up to Bruntz. I'll let him pick the direction of the next topic. Baseball starts here in about 9 days. Basketball started like 9 months ago, and it feels like it's been 9 years. Which one would you rather discuss first?
we could expand on baseball next week a little bit if you want to. Brian, you've seen it all up close in person. You've been standing there on the sidewalk as the cars have been colliding and the flaming dumpster's been rolling by in the parade. You want to talk some hoops?
We can talk some hoops if the people have the stomach for it.
We'll be
I don't think
brief.
I have the stomach for it.
Since we last talked, Brian, what it seemed like things you were building towards something, maybe a win, and then Saturday at noon happened. What the heck happened? Why Northwestern?
I'd preface this by saying I don't know exactly when people listen to this, but Wednesday night they're playing Minnesota, and this is previous to that. Minnesota's not very good either, so maybe that's the one. And if it's not, you can snicker as you listen to it, and you heard me say that. I think it could be the one, but I don't say that with any confidence.
Lots of guarantees today. Schaefer, top 10 class. Brian guaranteeing a Nebraska basketball win over Minnesota.
Can I ask Brian a question real quickly?
Yeah.
As someone who was attending his father's 70th birthday on Saturday, and we forgot that the game started at noon and then turned it on at halftime and then saw the score at halftime and then turned the game off and didn't watch any of the second half. What the hell happened on Saturday? Why? I guess from what I understand from people, part of the frustration is they were coming off of some pretty competitive contests earlier in that week or really earlier in the last week and a half. And then you get Northwestern at home and it totally cratered.
Yeah.
What did you see on Saturday?
I like how much you've distanced yourself from this team. You said, as you set that up, you said, from what I understand from people, this team of the last.
I didn't watch any of the game. I don't know.
I mean, like even before
Season ticket holder Mike Schaefer here.
I don't have nothing to do with basketball this year. Meanwhile, I'm going to the game tonight. I'll be there.
You are actually though a face to it, I think. And people can see that face now under a Super Bowl cap of what the problem is. There's a lot. You've been a big time follower of Husker hoops throughout your life, and you've cared as much as anybody to see them turn a corner. And Saturday was depressing in the fact that it was Alumni Day, so there was some of that going on with guys who had been in the program, and it was an okay crowd for a team that stinks. I don't think there was 15,000 there or anything. It's been said it was, but by the end of it, there was like a fifth or sixth of the crowd with like 8 minutes left. Like a sixth of the arena was full, and it was literally, and I'm not exaggerating this, I could hear the people in the section over like 5 rows down discussing what they're going to do next. And they had their mask on. They were following the mask rule, and I could still hear it. And so that was where it was. And I felt like there was no competitiveness on the defensive end whatsoever in that game. Like Northwestern came out and shot about 35 3-point attempts. And it was because it was open gym. Like it felt like you were at the rec center and guys were just, I'm going to get my shots up. That's how it seemed to me. And I know that they tried to make some adjustments defensively. Nebraska did. But it was the kind of like, I don't know. It was just so sour. Like the taste it gave you of like the effort on the defensive end. That's where people are really frustrated. They just don't feel like, especially on that end of the court, there's enough buy-in. And then when they get on the offensive end, it becomes when they get panicked and the other team is on the run. And Fred Hoiberg has said as much. They really derail themselves and go into one-on-one basketball. Like, I mean, it's like, okay, your turn, your shot, and even guys who are having good games will then throw up a 3-pointer with 28 on the shot clock in a possession sometimes that completely will halt some momentum they may have. So it's just, I know Hoiberg's at his wit's end. I know he's as much a competitor as anybody. I don't know where this is leading into next year. we've talked about it before. It's difficult when you look at the guys on the floor and you say, who exactly is coming back? Do I want those guys coming back? And, there's talk of the next recruiting class, but people heard about this recruiting class, which hasn't panned out. So they're not going to get too fired up about you pumping up the 22 group.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we've talked about it. Like, what do you, as a fan, hold on to for next year, and why do you basically trust that what you were told for this year is going to be true for next year? I mean, that's kind of where they're at, and it's this particular group is a hard group to root for because of what Brian talked about. Not defense, rebounding, that's all hustle and effort. And I think Nebraska basketball fans have shown in the past that they're willing to get behind bad teams that play hard. And from the get-go in that Northwestern game, I can't remember who it was that had the ball, but just a blow-by layup to start the game. And it was just like, oh, no. Like this, you could just tell they weren't in it. And I don't know, like, we're 9 days into February as we record this. I mean, it's going to be a month of very big picture questions for not only, this team, but also what this program is going to be going forward. Because, I mean, you guys, I'm sure, have friends that have suffered through a lot of really bad Nebraska basketball. And I'd always wondered for years, at what point do people say, I think I'm good, I'm going to take a step back. I think we're finally at that point for a lot of people.
You're using the same motion that George Costanza uses when he's out. He makes this good joke and he leaves. That is basically what you were doing there.
Yeah,
so
thanks. I'm out of here.
If only Nebraska could be as entertaining. This might be too strong. And I almost never find myself as the type of person who gets to this point. But it doesn't matter if it's this year or if he's given another. It's not going to work. It's just not going to. There's no point in my mind other than to save money for Nebraska to bring Fred Hoiberg back because it won't work next year. He's already failed. I just don't see any way that this could be successful enough next year to come back from. With football, and it was hard in football too, because 3-9 is damning in every possible way. But at least they were in games, and at least you sort of could squint and turn your head enough and make up enough arguments or whatever else you had to do. In basketball, it looks like crap. And I self-edited there because I would have used a different word. But apparently with YouTube now, I want to be a little bit more careful. Look at me learning on the fly. There's nothing worth being hopeful for with this team. And I hate being the one to say that. And I thought Fred Hoiberg was going to work. But I still don't know what it is that they can do based on what they've recruited for 3 years, based on how they've rolled things out there for 3 years. Is he going to fire his GM and Matt Abdelmassa? Is that going to be I don't get it. I don't know what possibly will work for Nebraska next year if Fred Hoiberg is going to be the coach. And I don't know why anyone would believe that it's going to be any different at this point. And I feel really bad for him because I do believe that he wants this to be successful. But he doesn't have it. He doesn't have the answers. He doesn't have the pieces. He didn't recruit guys that work with whatever it is that he wants to do. And he didn't go get bigs or point guards or things that just seem like givens on a Nebraska basketball roster, on a Big Ten basketball roster. So as we sit here at the end of, or the middle of February, working towards the end of a just disgustingly bad season, it doesn't matter to me if they win any games at this point in time. I just don't see any hope for next year either. So other than the $18 million that sit as a buyout, there's really nothing good in this entire situation for anybody. There's nothing good for Fred. There's nothing good for Trev Alberts. There's nothing good for Nebraska basketball fans. Like when it comes time for people to renew their tickets, they're just supposed to click yes for a program that can't win 10 games, for a program that can't win conference games. It is just incredibly alarming how bad it got this year. And it wasn't good before. But I think the patience is gone. My patience is completely gone with it. Like I just
can't tell.
Yeah, I've always been one to mask my emotions. No one can ever tell what I'm thinking. But I just don't know where you come back from this at all. Ramel Lloyd, Blaise Keita, like these guys, I was excited about. But there's nothing that's going to be left for them to work with that's here. And then what incremental progress is enough to keep this thing going down the road? Like I just, at some point, regardless of cost, and I know that's easy for me to say, you just have to be done with it. And I think that's where Nebraska is. Honestly, I think the fans deserve better than this, significantly better than this. And I don't think that there's any roadmap back from it. And I never thought that I would be the one saying that. But this is atrocious.
You know what fans deserve the last month? Beer. Turn the taps on. if you're gonna, if this is how it's gonna be, you just, for the last however many home games they have, just turn them on. Give the people, all 7,000 of them that are using their tickets, give them some beer. That's what you got to do.
Are they going to do a discount on that beer too?
No.
Full price cheaper at home.
Full price Bud Light for everybody.
I'm trying to think of say I was the defense attorney who got assigned a tough case. Like you're like you just got thrown this case. You're like, you got to take it on, even though you're not going to look good in the public eye. The only thing I can offer up to that as the rebuttal, and I do understand when Hoiberg speaks of it, the timing of which he's trying to build this program has come in obviously a weird time in our country, in which the first year, we all know that the first team he put on the floor that first season was sort of like, I got to put guys out there. They're requiring us to play games.
We got to have 5.
So he did it. That was the first year. And it was the only, I actually have talked myself into like, well, you know how PJ Fleck used to say the old year 0 thing as a coach. I was like, I kind of get it in this case, what it's talking about, but still it was, it was a tough thing to sit through. And then year 2 for Hoiberg was sort of strange with the whole where they played 15 games in 30 days. But it is hard to convince yourself to be the defense attorney with what we're watching this season with a team that I think they really believed going into. I mean, you go back to the exhibition game against Colorado, and that was a feel-good day over there. Like, they moving the ball, guys are hitting shots. It's like everybody sort of believed what they'd heard. Like, this team's knocking down threes all summer. That's the way it's going to be. They can't rebound, but they're going to make up for it because they're going to – and we've talked about it back then. Remember, we were like, oh, this team's going to – they're going to run some good team out of a gym one night because they can shoot it. We said that, and you could find those clips, and it's unfortunate that we said that. I said that. But my biggest defense of it is I do like on paper the class he has, and that last year, the first 2 years were really muddled sort of because of the circumstances. And that's what, he brings up a lot, but it's such a frustrating point. I asked him the other day, and I don't know if it was a proper question or not, to be honest with you, but I asked him if he was starting to get into the conversations basically with guys about what's happening next year. And that's a tough thing to ask, a weird thing, maybe not even the right thing. I don't know, to ask a coach with 8 games to play, but I think it comes into the equation now because let's be honest, like, what's the map? You got to show this fan base and Trev Alberts a map of this is what we're going to do differently or whatever. Well, there might not be, but that's what he's got to, I think you almost have to get into these discussions that we would consider premature most times about, like, is this guy leaving or not? we wait till the end of the season. Well, in some ways, you got to start knowing now, like who is coming back and how do they fit with what you want. And I don't know what's going to happen. I'm 50-50 on what's going to happen right now. As far as like, who's running this team next year.
No doubt about it. All right, let's finish up with this. Zac Taylor, former Nebraska quarterback, coaching in a Super Bowl on Sunday. Cincinnati Bengals take on the Los Angeles Rams. Give me your game prediction and then your favorite Zac Taylor memory if you have one. We'll start with Bruntz because he just frowned.
I think America's story continues, and I think the Bengals will win by 4. I'll say 29-25.
All right. Do you have a Zac Taylor memory?
I have many. My favorite one, though, was probably the high point, I would say, of the 2005 football season, which was when an order was restored at Folsom Field. I remember Zac Taylor very proudly wearing that Restore the Order shirt in post-game interviews. And I guess it's still that way at Colorado now, but it used to be that the hallway to get back to the visitors' locker room was so tight that they had to do all the post-game interviews like out on the field. Like they took guys back down there. And it was like it was dark, and they turned off a lot of the lights. And just Zac Taylor just being thrilled about the way they had played. Because if you remember, that was actually a pretty big upset for the way that season had gone. But that memory will always be seared in my mind, no matter how many Super Bowls Zac Taylor wins, is that the order was restored in November 2005. And don't forget it.
All right, BC.
I think the Rams are going to win. I don't really want that.
Kevin O'Connell homer, aren't you?
Yeah, although I would like to see Kevin O'Connell's that offense per little bit. He doesn't call the plays, but the Rams remind you of the Bucs last year? I say that in the fact that they've got sort of this roster built up of like guys who have kind of been around it, like some of these veteran key guys, and you sort of think they know how to get it done now. Like they weren't. I don't think these are the two best teams in the NFL this year that are playing, and but I do think the Rams sort of had the bracket set up right for them, and they got sort of this cagey bunch of guys, and I think they're going to win. I think it's going to be kind of a boring game. Rams 27-16. My favorite Zac Taylor memory is probably the win over A&M when he drove them down on the last drive. And there was a 4th down pass. It wasn't our man Peterson who caught it, was it? Was he on that team? Todd Peterson? You know what I'm talking about? They had like a 4th and 10 early in that series, and he kind of had to scramble his right, and he made a pretty.
Wasn't that also the late hit was on that 4th down too, and so it all just kind of helped push the ball further down the field.
They had a late hit.
Are you not remembering this on purpose as a way to needle Todd Peterson?
No.
Although the way you said it, it was like you knew the answer, but you weren't going to say what it actually was, just because he listens and would be really pissed.
No,
well, we actually have Todd Peterson backstage. We're going to bring him out right now.
He pops up his little. No, he wouldn't fit in the camera because he's 6'4". He'd be too tall for it. But I don't know if it was Todd who caught it, but somebody caught a 4th down pass, which was a beautiful throw on the run by Zac Taylor. I think the late hit came later on when they got down in the red zone and gave them a fresh set, and then the purified touchdown happened. I also remember Dan Erickson was a wide receiver on that team, sort of a walk-on guy, and he popped up for like a critical catch on that drive. And I remember my buddy was next to me. I wasn't covering him that year, and we were like, Dan Erickson. That was pretty interesting. But that was probably the best moment of the Callahan era.
Yeah.
That
2006 team is one of my favorite, like, random Nebraska teams. I was a freshman in college. I was at South Dakota State, and I made it down for a few games. Would watch them up in Brookings at Cubbies, the Nebraska bar up in Brookings, South Dakota. I really like that team. The Texas A&M game definitely stands out on that comeback. I always just thought Zac Taylor was tough as hell. Like I felt like he just had the crap beat out of him every game, and he just kept getting, maybe more so in 2005 than 2006, but it just felt like he was just tough and was constantly, someone was pulling like a chunk of grass out of his helmet kind of thing because he had just gotten beaten down again. And so I had always a lot of respect for him. So I'm excited for him. I feel like at this point, I have lost so much money in my life betting against Joe Burrow that I can't in good faith do it on Sunday, which means if I take the Bengals, the Rams are going to win. But if I take the Rams, then the Bengals will win, and it'll be more lost money to Joe Burrow, who destroyed me in the college football playoff each week here in the NFL playoff. I can't get away from him. So I'm gonna say the Bengals win. I'm gonna say he engineers a game-winning drive. They move down the field. They're able to score late on like a T. Higgins, Dwight Clark-esque catch in the background, and the Bengals win their first Super Bowl title this weekend. And Chris Whitney, the only Bengals fan any of us knows, very excited. So hopefully that gets to happen.
Were you guys? It was the 4th and 3 for 22 yards, right?
Yes.
That was a completion to Todd Peterson.
Oh, Todd.
Look at that.
TP.
I really wish we had him backstage right now. We could have dropped that on BC. That would have been great.
He had 7 catches for 82 yards and a touchdown that day. So don't forget
Todd was
that
good. Todd was a good player. I'm not just saying buttering him up. He was like legit. Like, you take that guy on your team. Big plays and big moments. That's all I got. I like your Bengals pick though, because that's going to light a fire under Kevin O'Connell. Stopped short of that Super Bowl ring. He's going to head to Minnesota on a mission. Well, I'm good with that. If he wins his first Super Bowl as the head coach with the Vikings, I'd be okay with that. I'm sure you'd be good with that too. All right, that should do it for us. This is our first ever video podcast. We're going to be doing this with regularity moving forward. I promise I won't give an impassioned speech about Nebraska basketball each time. We'll find better ways to use our time, I'm sure. Bruntz says baseball next week. We're going to be chatting up about Nebraska baseball. They'll have their first game that's coming up in 9 days. Do we even know what a weekend rotation might look like? Bruntz will probably have that answer for us in a week.
Yeah, I mean, it's I would say that Kyle Perry and Shea Shanneman will be part of it. They got 4 games that opening weekend, so it's always 4 games, one of which is a 7-inning part of a doubleheader, which I digress. But I am going to show up next week with a very specific set of questions for you, and we'll double back at the end of the year, and we'll see how you do on a variety of over-unders and other things. So already excited for this. Look forward to it.
So much enthusiasm. He just can't wait, folks. He loves his job. No one loves their job as much as Michael Bruntz. You can tell with his enthusiasm.
Yes. Excited.
No All right. Well, you can catch that enthusiasm every week on the Husker247 podcast. You can find it in written form at Husker247.com. Plenty of articles going up. We're running through the 2022 class, setting up 2023. BC checking in with guys of note, people you shouldn't forget about as we get into. What about this guy? Yeah. He's written about several of them. Braxton Clark was yesterday. Do you have a preview? Who's coming up? Who's next? Xavier Betts should be on the site by the time this pops up. So there'll be that. And I don't know. We'll keep going. Just guys, I mean, it's not – you didn't forget about Xavier Betts, but guys who are going to be right in the center of the Too Deep conversation and spring storylines, basically. I can think of some message board posters that would accuse a former Nebraska wide receivers coach of forgetting about Xavier Betts. So, okay. So there's always that. All right. We will catch you next time with the Husker247 podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer. For Brian Christopherson, Michael Bruntz. We'll see you next week.